Thank you. Hello, my name is Charlotte. I look after the community here at Climate Salad, and this is one of our Lunch and Learns, which is on a very incredibly hot topic around adopting a culture of AI, making sure that we use it to the best of our abilities within our team and within our climate tech solution. Before we get started and before I hand over to our wonderful mentor, Eli, and his teammate and co-founder, Garrick, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land of which we meet. For me, that's the Gubbi Gubbi people, Wanya Nullam. Welcome. And I honour their continuous connection to country, land and sea, and pay my respects to their elders past and present and joining us today. I also recognise that for our First Nations people, the oldest continuous culture on this planet of ours, as the original and first climate tech innovators. And there is so much we can learn by leaning into their knowledge and skills. Handing over to you, Eli.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you guys for being here and for inviting us to do this. I am excited for what I'm going to learn from my co-founder, Garrick, in a few minutes here. Just a quick way of introduction. My name is Eli Harrell. I'm based in the Philippines, but originally from the US and been here almost 10 years now. I met Garrick about 9 years ago, and we met in a Toastmasters club, and I was completely mind blown when I got to know this quite a bit younger than me, but it's taught me so much. Garrick is just a consummate self-teacher and an amazing entrepreneur. He and I founded Valhalla about 5 years ago now, in beginning 2019, yeah. And we have developed it into a company that helps purpose-driven, impact-driven entrepreneurs and innovators all over the world who are building technology to make sure that they're building the right technology product and they've got the right team and the right processes in place to have the impact that they want to have. So we do deep partnerships with startups that are in that space. And I've been a mentor here in Climate Salad for a little while, but I'm very interested in supporting this community better and doing what I can to help anybody out there that I can be useful to. And just so just appreciative to be here. And I will turn it over to Garrick. He's going to talk to you guys about how we can build cultures. Obviously, we're in a period of time right now, and I don't want to, Garrick's going to introduce the context here, but we're in a period of time where things are shifting and changing so fast with AI, just changing the way that we look at and do everything. So as we're building organizations, like how do we really look at adopting that, not just tactically, but psychologically and culturally? Like, how do we build a culture where people are not afraid of it, but actually leveraging it and getting each individual person to do that? So I will turn it over to Garrick to talk about that.
Thank you, Eli. So we're going to be giving this presentation on building a culture of AI adoption, positioning yourself, your team, and your company for AI. A few notes about me before jumping in is I've personally been obsessed with AI for the last 6 years and have led about 4 companies towards AI adoption. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you the things that I've learned on that journey. And the first thing I want to get into is more of the nature of the problem. What are we really experiencing when it comes to thinking about AI? What are we experiencing when it comes to trying to roll out AI in our organization? The truth of the matter is a lot of us are in a position of FOMO right now. We're in a position of the fear of missing out, feeling like, everyone's doing this and we're being left behind. The social media, everyone here is familiar with social media of, you post your 1% of successes and you compare yourself to everyone else's as if that's their whole life. And so this is leading to a lot of distracted and unproductive movement. And so the old adage of slow is smooth and smooth is fast really applies here. We need to be making sure that we're moving strategically. And while AI is a great tool, to he who has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And we need to be making sure that we're finding the right nails and the right situations to be applying AI into. So if we do that, the flip side is that there is massive disruption happening and there's tremendous opportunity to increase revenue and productivity if we move fast. So let's dive right into that. Fundamentally, driving AI adoption in our companies can come in one of 2 different flavors. One is bottom up. This is where we are leading by example, and we are encouraging people as individuals to be learning AI, contributing ideas, and supercharging themselves. The other way is top down. That's where we know exactly where we want to apply it, and we can systematically implement it in our organization. And when I'm thinking about these two ways, it's really helpful for me to think about the fact that we've been here before. So if you think about in the old days when computers were first getting rolled out, and then later on as computers were being upgraded with tools like Microsoft Office, the people that were first taking in those tools did not grow up with them. They were having to learn them from scratch. And there was a mixture of companies implementing it top down, saying, hey, we are now rolling this out to our entire organization. All of our accountants will start using spreadsheets. But there was also a bottom-up approach where people were learning in their off times and they were contributing to the company's vision. And thinking about that balance and which ones you want to be leaning on, for me, creates a much cleaner roadmap than being stuck in a position of FOMO. And we're going to be talking about both today. We're probably going to be talking a little more about top down because that's something that can be put into a 7-step process, but bottom up is going to be mattering just as much. So let's actually dive into that bottom up approach first. How do you drive AI adoption organically in your organization? Well, the nice thing about this is that AI at this point, the reason why it's become so widespread is because it can be accessed by anyone. It's a tool that people can be using. And so it starts with leading by example and using the tools yourself. So I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a roadmap. This is not we could probably do an entire presentation of just the tools that you should be learning and studying yourself. We're going to go through this part pretty fast, but it will give you a bit of a roadmap if you're thinking about your first 20 hours of learning AI. If you can go in really deep, carve out the time to be really understanding this technology and the different tools out there that utilize it, you're going to be much further ahead than people who are just dabbling. So here are the tools I would recommend that you look into, probably in this order. The first is obviously ChatGPT. I'm pretty sure everyone here, though, has already began using this quite a bit in their first 20 hours. Probably a lot of you guys have even purchased the paid model, played around with plugins, etc. So I'm going to suggest a few more things to widen your understanding of AI and get a better sense of the environment out there so that you can bring it into your organization much cleaner. First of all, there's a lot of Chrome extensions out there that bring the power of AI to any website you visit. Two that come to mind, which are the logos I have here. One is Merlin. This is a tool that summarizes an article that you're on. It puts AI onto the website and then summarizes, gives you takeaways, etc. Also works on videos, so you can get the main takeaways from a video. It allows the consumption of content to go much faster. The other one is ChatSonic. This one has really carved out a niche in being able to reply to emails much faster and to give it the proper context. It reads all the context of the email thread above. You can give a much shorter prompt of where it should go next, and it can draft up a response from there. And there are loads of other Chrome extensions out there I would recommend you check out. It goes far beyond just the ChatGPT user interface. Then there are other alternatives to ChatGPT, like Jasper and some of its competitors. Ones that come to mind are also Writer and Autoblogger. These are tools that are really, truthfully, running on ChatGPT in the background, but between you and that interface, it has added a lot of middleware that makes writing copy, sales copy, emails, advertisement copy much easier and much more streamlined. And if you are trying to roll out the best tools to your organization where they maybe have not learned how to have not yet mastered how to brainstorm with AI or kind of be playing tennis with AI back and forth, then these tools can really help level up your game. I would say that these three, if you dive into it, you'll already be ahead of most dabblers. But if you want to go into the really, really advanced mode, I would recommend two other tools. The first is the OpenAI Playground. This is a tool here that will show the user interface of essentially the back end of ChatGPT in a really easy format. And so I would carve out a couple of hours, just sit down here and really get to understand this technology if you want to be integrating it in in an automated way and in a systematic way into your organization, which I'll explain what that looks like a little bit later, but wanted to give the preview of this now, because here you can understand what the variables are that drives ChatGPT. You can much more fine tune your system. You have access to the system message. And I know that a lot of the power users that I know, once they start using the playground, they never go back to ChatGPT, and they use this pretty much exclusively because you can fine tune your prompts a lot more. So I recommend doing this step before the next one, which is trying out tools like Zapier and other integration software that can add AI into your platforms directly. So I think a lot of people here know what Zapier is and those types of tools, but for those who don't, essentially it can act as middleware that allows your platforms to talk in between themselves. So if you have a new lead that's filled out a form in order for them to be added into your system, what Zapier can do is it can then automatically take that data and move it to any other platform, whether that's just a simple spreadsheet, your MailChimp messaging system, or your CRM. But with ChatGPT, you can, using Zapier, insert it into the middle of those processes to, for instance, draft up messages, come up with suggestions, potentially even do reports if people enter information about, for instance, looking to be audited on their climate impact. Maybe ChatGPT could take that data and already spit out a few suggestions. A lot of power can be unlocked by adding it into your automations and integrations. And if you are also interested in image-based generative AI, the tools I would recommend probably in this order would be Stable Diffusion, which is a great open source image generation technology. Midjourney, which probably has cornered the market for some of the highest aesthetic art generation, which can be really useful for certain advertising and other usages. And Adobe Firefly, which gives you, if you're more of a designer by trade, can give you a lot of fine tuning with your image editing capabilities. With that roadmap in mind, something that I see a lot of people say when they're first diving into these tools is they say either they make the mistake, they're just watching tutorials, or just as dangerous, in my opinion, is they say with a little bit of ego, like, oh no, I just learned by doing things. Let me just get my hands dirty and I'm just gonna like figure it out. Really, with these tools that are as cutting edge as they are, there needs to be a balance of both watching what other people are doing, how they're doing it, and then to be replicating those same results yourself. So I would highly recommend to be thinking of it almost like a hero sandwich. You put some bread in, that's, first watching others, you then try it yourself, you put in the next level of bread of like checking other people, and it's just back and forth and back and forth. And you can make that ultimate hero sandwich. You're going to really speed up your learning on these tools that very few people have mastered. We're really part of a community of creators and entrepreneurs learning this technology. So once you have dived into yourself, you're leading by example, to then, this is beyond just you driving culture of adoption. First, you challenge yourself to use it for at least one task per day. And then you start challenging your team to use it in their own tasks. Because once you understand it yourself, now when you're giving a task to someone in your organization or collaborating with someone, you know how they should be using these tools. And so you're giving them roadmaps for how they can use this. And it probably starts with just giving them initially the task of spend 2 hours distraction-free with the tool that you think is most relevant. Of all the things you're going to be studying, Chrome extensions, Jasper, ChatGPT, you can give them a task just to do a deep dive on that one technology. Bonus idea here, something that we've done really effectively in our organizations is created a database that's a shared database of ideas for people to be using AI technology in their day-to-day job. For those of you who know Alex Hormozy, this is an idea I got from him, and his was a little bit clickbaity of like, find out how to replace yourself with AI. But probably realistically, it's not how to replace yourself, it's how do you save time with AI? How do you get more done with less with AI? Give this as a challenge to your whole organization, have them contribute their ideas in a shared place. This could be a Google Doc. Here's a Notion database for those of you who love Notion like we do, and try to make it fun. You can offer a prize for the best idea generated. And as you're doing this collaboratively with your team, let's talk about the human element. What are going to be common points of resistance to this type of digital transformation? And the thing I would recommend you think about this is that we've been here before with these massive disruptions, and the points of human nature have not really changed. The main resistance comes from friction. Why do we have to do it a new way when I'm most comfortable with the old way? I know the old way of doing things. And also fear. A lot of people are just straight up scared that they're going to become replaced, or that there's going to be too big of a disruption coming, and that uncertainty breeds fear, which breeds resistance. And so how do you navigate that? It's the same way you navigate any major transformation inside of a business. It just comes down to the basics of leadership and human psychology. You start with creating a compelling vision. That compelling vision has to answer the question, what's in it for them? And if they're extremely fear-driven, it could just be as simple as the reality that they're not going to be replaced by AI. They're going to be replaced by somebody who is using AI and working at a 10x level than they were before. And that's what's going to be capturing their jobs. So create a compelling vision, and that compelling vision answers what's in it for them. How will they benefit from using this technology? Make sure you're communicating effectively, which really just means you're listening effectively. You're hearing what are their questions, concerns, what are the areas where this breaks down for them. You recognize and reward progress. So you've set the vision, and then as people are working towards it, and you're saying we're an AI first company, people do it, you're rewarding that, you're recognizing, you're looking for those wins. And of course, you're leading by example, which is something we've talked about already. If you're just doing these fundamentals the same way you would do for any digital transformation or organizational transformation, then you're going to be able to navigate through that resistance very effectively. All right, now let's talk about the top-down way to be implementing AI. How do you systematically take step by step, find a way, a place in your business to add AI top down? Well, there's the first thing to note, it bears repeating, is that AI is a tool, and you shouldn't start with a tool. Instead, ask yourself, what is the problem you want to solve? Then work backwards to make sure you have the right tool for the job. And if you've been studying, starting with bottom up, studying multiple tools, you won't just be saying, oh, how do we use ChatGPT here? You'll be looking at Chrome extensions, looking at automations, looking at other tools out there on the market. Or just honestly ask yourself, do we need AI at all here? But how do you actually do this? Well, for me, it breaks down to 7 steps. First, know what AI is good for, which is something you'll already have been doing as you're learning the technology, but I have a few inputs here that I want to add in. Second, you look at your business, you find the places to add it, you decide how to add AI, you get your team on board. Specifically, as you get your team on board, you find a champion and you make sure that champion is well empowered. You start executing, and then you just evaluate and iterate your way to success. So let's go through what those steps look like. First one, what is AI good for? When I'm thinking about AI and where it can be better than a human by themselves, or when it's better than other tools in the market, I think about 2 different criteria. Number 1, where are the inputs and outputs very clear? Where can I define really clearly, this is what goes into the process, and this is what I'm expecting out of it? And where are those inputs readily available? So, for instance, if you are trying to add AI into your sales, but your sales is multimodal, some of it's in person, you're forming partnerships, you're forming relationships, you're drawing ideas from other vendors or other relationships, you're putting all this together, the inputs are very unclear. It could just be, what did you read in that book this morning? The inputs are very fuzzy. But at certain parts of your business, especially those parts that happen at scale, you typically have already really well defined the inputs. If you have a process where a user fills in a form to become a prospect, and then you have their website and you just scrape their website, at that point, the inputs are pretty clear. AI can be applied in that area. So where can you give AI full context? Where is the data and the inputs easy to access systematically? Number two is, where do you still need a human, but you need a human supercharged? You need a human with a brainstorming and a research companion. Because AI knows everything on the internet, or really 10% of the internet as of ChatGPT 3.5. We don't know how much ChatGPT 4 knows, but it's tending towards 100%. And even that 10% is a 10% that we access 99.9% of the time. So effectively has consumed the entire internet. These creations are incredibly powerful, but the quality you get out of it will be directly proportional to the quality of the questions you ask to it. But that can be done in a ping pong style. And it's the same thing as having a brainstorming buddy or a research companion. And so where you think that it's still very creative, it's something that needs a human, you're probably right, but that human can be supercharged. And that's the second criteria of where you can add AI. So with those two in mind, we would move on to the next step, which is you look at your business as a series of links in a chain. This right here is a very, very broad chain going from marketing, sales, operations, and fulfillment, HR, which supports the following, especially operations, and then finances, which actually tracks the revenue and expenses in the organization. Each one of these nodes you would break down into a much more fine sliced. For marketing and prospecting, where do you get your leads initially? Social media, business development, SEO, etc. For your sales, you probably already have something like a CRM or a process for doing the sales. So you would slice all of these nodes into very, very fine chunks. And in every one of those processes and every single connection between those processes, you can ask yourself, can AI be added here? Asking yourself these two criteria for success, and also asking yourself, what tools out there on the market, which you've been studying from the bottom-up approach, how can this be applied? Once you find the chunks in your business that can be supercharged, and actually one more note about this, there's entire classes taught on this one point, but you want to find those links in the chain that are underperforming, that are the bottlenecks, and be putting more of your focus on those. In business in this way, very often we get more success by focusing on our weaknesses as opposed to our strengths. So the way to think about this is that if you have 100 prospects and you have only 1% conversion rate, if you can increase your prospects by like 50, so you get a big number increase here, 50, or you can increase from 1% to 2%. The 2% is going to make a much bigger difference than increasing it to 50. But of course, the counter argument here is if you focus on your strengths, typically your strengths compound faster than your weaknesses. Because if we're naturally talented at something in a business, typically more effort there is going to come up with an exponential increase. So that's where the argument on both sides has some merit. But typically speaking, in this process where I'm looking at AI as something that's going to supercharge us from the outside, increasing one of your weaknesses is probably going to be more potent. And so that's what I'm typically looking for as I'm breaking a company down and asking, where can we add AI into it? All right, with that tip out of the side or out of the way, let's dive into the next part. So how to add value into the AI or add value with the AI. We've been alluding to this, but you can either give the tool as a tool to the employee. That's something very, very simple. The employee is already using this software, is already following this process. You just supercharge them, or it takes a little more work but can pay very high dividends. If you can break the process down mechanically, can you add AI automation with tools like Zapier so that you're not human can get totally freed up from the process, so then they can focus their efforts elsewhere. With that question in mind, it's now time to get your team on board. The way that you do that, same as we were talking about before with resistance. You create a compelling vision, you communicate effectively, you recognize progress, and you lead by example. But typically when you're doing these bigger transformations, the top leadership is going to be too busy. They have enough things on their plate, and what they need is a champion in the organization. So this is often the secret of getting shit done in a company that's already busy. You find a champion, and that champion is someone who hopefully is very close to the actual hardware. They're close to the reality of the situation because they have the richest data stream to them, but you need to empower them for success. So you create clear success criteria. This basically means that at the end of the project, if you're asking yourself, this was successful, this was an unsuccessful, what would be those measurements? It can be KPIs, it can be OKRs, it can be anything that you want to call it. I like the term success criteria, taken from Dan Sullivan. But you give them that clear measurement of success. You set the expectations on reporting progress and receiving support. In other words, the cadence of communication. Are you going to be meeting with them once a week? Are you going to be meeting with them daily? Can they contact you out of the blue? You set that expectations there. And then you make sure the full team is clear on the champion's responsibility and that they are there to support the champion. So if you're doing someone who's is very close to hardware, they might not always be in a leadership position. You make sure the entire leadership team is looking at that person as the right person for the job and is going to be supporting them. And you're doing it while getting them all on board with the new vision and communicating with them effectively. And then you start executing fast. Once slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So you work the previous steps without rushing it, without feeling anxiety. You took your time to find the right tool for the job. You didn't prematurely optimize, but once you know that this is the right tool for the job and you know how to add it in, then it's about speed. It's time to try to get a working model as fast as possible so then you can iterate on it. Evaluate based on your original success criteria and iterate quickly. And that's the 7 steps to implementing it top down. If you do this along with a bottom up approach, leading by example, you're going to be in a terrific position for building a culture of AI adoption and positioning yourself, your team, and your company for increased revenue and productivity. And that is the plan portion of our conversation. I'll pass the mic over to Eli and hold the space for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Garrick. I would love to hear what other people are thinking or curious about. I can kind of say a few parting words toward the end, but would love to hear what you guys are, what are you guys already doing? Where did this open up some questions for you? How could either Garrick, probably he's the one that would be the most helpful since we've got him here. But if anybody here has something you want to pick his brain, he's just been studying not only AI tools, AI under the hood and how it really works. He has a deep understanding of kind of the whole thing, and also companies and how startups are built and how AI can really be implemented to increase our effectiveness. So anybody here want to jump in and pick his brain, go for it.
Roger, did you want to come off mute and ask your question? Also, shout out to Johan for actually making lunch on the Lunch and Learn session. I'm so impressed with that. So go, Roger.
Oh, well,
nice.
I'll say first thing, I can't multitask, so I could never, ever do that. Yeah, just a quick question. What are the kind of the things AI should not be used for, which it does badly? The things that, you think, oh, this would be really great, and we should just stay away from using AI for?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I think on one important level is, we need to recognize where we're at in the exponential curve. So, we're having this conversation for the recording like July 2023. And there's this, I think the common wisdom is areas where we cannot abdicate responsibility. And so in situations where the consequences are dire, and therefore as a society, we say that if that's a situation, we must assign clear accountability and make sure that person is still properly incentivized to take that accountability. That's the common wisdom. Arguably, I would say, though, that even those situations, using AI as an assistant is still appropriate, partially because as the AI gets better and better and better, you will be able to lean on it in different ways, but theoretically would never totally abdicate accountability, at least with our values as a society, which I think are probably wiser than we think. But fundamentally, that's a common wisdom. If if I was going to give my own more nuanced take on it, I think the idea of where the inputs are very unclear makes a lot of sense. I think that we as humans are very blind to our own heuristics, so it's very unclear to us what things should be easy and hard, and because we often don't know why something's harder than we would have expected. It becomes kind of hard to fully wrap our heads around it.
When something is challengingly complex, but we can't really break down that problem, like to understand why we don't understand it.
Exactly. And I find normally in those situations, it's because the inputs are unclear. It's not exactly clear what are the questions we should be asking. So it's like, I need to create a sales letter for my organization. You hire an amazing copywriter and you bring them in, and then it turns out, well, like, yeah, but you don't know who your ICP is. And you're not really sure what the value of the product is. And you don't really know who you're selling to. And like all those things you only uncover like halfway through the process. You're like, oh shit, like that's why everything is on hard mode. So for me, that is just another way of saying the inputs are still unclear. So I think in those situations, AI cannot really rescue you, but you can use it as a ping pong partner to say, like, what would you need to know to do this? How could we gather this data? So that's how I would think about its limitations. But and the last thing I would say is it's still very strong with blue collar. It's still, reality is infinitely complex, so it's struggling with the real world a lot. But
the physical world.
But even there, AI is making strides. It's just that we shouldn't expect the same level of improvement there as we can with white collar work, with working in the vacuum of the internet. So just set the expectations there, but it's getting better and better all the time.
Just adding a little lens of what the first one that you said, which is the abdication of accountability. We're seeing a lot of problems with people using AI to create written content and then just pumping it out to the internet, and you can't tell when you're reading an article that doesn't know what it's talking about, and that's kind of skipping the filter of the human that has the responsibility. Is we're abdicating, we're just putting
exactly
truth, we're putting truth out into the world, but it isn't truth. So I think the way I'm looking at that is just recognizing that we still have to remember that it's our job to be that filter and make sure that when we use AI tools, we're still responsible for the quality that we're putting out to other people.
Jeff,
does that answer your question, Roger? Or
yeah, thanks. That's useful. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
And Jeff, you had a question. Would you like to come off mic?
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I was working this morning on AI and doing a Google search, and I was verbalizing it, and suddenly ChatGPT popped up and gave me the response that I was looking for in Google. So it struck me then that it's actually might be easier to search AI than search Google to get what you want. And I was just looking for a vehicle checklist.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that the search engines right now are scrambling, and they still need to solve the business model, because ultimately the AI is still consuming the content out there. So as a civilization, there's a big question of how do we incentivize hopefully even higher quality content than a lot of the trash that was being pumped out before. But like, how do we at the very least not incentivize more trash coming out so that the AIs can stay at a high level of quality? But fundamentally, I don't think it's a matter of replacing. I hear a common thing used by futurists is that the answer of like binary points is almost always both. Like, are we ever gonna have, is remote work the future, post-pandemic? Well, the answer is always, yeah, both. It will probably be more, but it won't be everything. So I think that wisdom applies here. But it will certainly augment and potentially partially eclipse search, certainly.
Interesting
Shan,
point, just around applying that filter. I did a paper about, it was 30 years ago, in AI, around how AI will actually manage humans, and some of the decisions we make, because it is only just a single person that's making that decision, whereas the AI can actually leverage multiple inputs from different people's perspectives. So if done right, you can reduce some of that bias of an individual. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma around that. But we're very early in the stages of maturity of AI, and especially in its use in business.
The only thought that comes to mind in that, when was that paper written? Do you remember when
it was
that?
University days, so it was way back when, and we've had several dark ages of AI since, because it stopped and started and stopped and started. I mean, now it's really come to the front, and the average person is now aware of it, where it wasn't before. It was all scientific and it's kind of hidden in a back room. Now it's come to the front, and the general public are aware of it now. But there is going to be an interesting dilemma as to when it breaks that point of being far better in actually filtering itself than we could ever be in filtering it.
I have a lot of thought. My AI futurist hat is now like coming on. I think I'll save my notes for the end in case there's more. In case there's a lot of like any practical questions or things. But I think that there's a really interesting conversation to be had there about where this is all going. Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff really appearing in IP and what's used with inside the AI generated by content. We've just heard what Google have said, that anything that's out there is going to be free game to be brought into the models. But there's probably an awful lot of people not realizing what from a business perspective, what they've made available and is kind of a little bit hidden away is now starting to be consumed into some of the AI models that they didn't intend to be presented in that way and use and provides a bit of kind of exposure for that business in some of their IP.
Brendan, we could definitely discuss AI and its applications to business for so long, but there are a few people. No, that's okay. We've got a few people with their hands up. So please do put your hands up if you have a question. So Shania.
Hey, thanks for that presentation. It was pretty awesome. So for us, we are a SaaS platform, and we're currently using AI software essentially to almost to replace the SDR. And so basically just generating lead and then get us to the point where appointments booking, and then the humans, essentially us and our team. And we're paying about $1,500 for it at the moment. And my question is probably like, have I ever looked like a free version that I can hack a few of them, that I can actually make it work for actually less? I mean, I know that $1,500 US is not equivalent to a human SDR, is already cheaper. But I was just thinking that I don't know if there's any other free one or cheaper one out there that potentially we could, basically what it does is, scout through all the lead that we've input in, right? This is the lead that we want. And it's got a set criteria of these are the 4 or 6 series of email that you follow up, try and get to the action point, which is click a booking. I don't know, just kind of,
Yeah, so it's like you have a vendor right now that is using AI for its SDR work, and the question is, could you replicate that? Like, does 1,500 sound reasonable? Essentially, that's the question. No, it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I'm just being a founder. Yeah.
I mean, no, it's a right question. From where I'm standing, if you're non-technical yourself or you don't have a very technical CTO, probably hiring a developer or bringing one on board, that developer could cost 5 times more per month than that software. So the question is, on how long would it take to create that? And if it takes a month, then it takes 5 months before it pays for itself. And I don't know the full functionality, but if I were thinking of it that way, I would be considering, more what's the skills I already have there, as opposed to cost saving. The flip side, though, is that this technology is, I think it's become popular for like last 8 months. And so a lot of these people can overcharge because they're playing arbitrage with the future. Right now, they're overcharging because there's not enough competition that will drive the cost down. And so if I were in your shoes and I did not have a strong technical background, like for us, I think it would be a no-brainer. I think we would just want to build it, partially because then we can also show like, hey, this is something we built, and other, prospects, like all of a sudden, like, it's a portfolio piece. Like for us, it's a no-brainer. We should build it. For you, without knowing your team's composition, I might just bite the bullet and say, okay, let's do a reevaluation every 3 months, because probably something cheaper will be coming out. Realistically,
true.
that would be how I think about it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Oh, and also another thing, quick question. So the thing is, once you start, you get the booking, but you never actually interact with them before. So they kind of feel like they've been exchanging email with you for a while now. And then as soon as you actually face to face with them, you actually don't really have all of that background. You can see back all the conversation. Do you think the sign-off signature on those emails should just be yes, like Shania, and then AI generated?
Like, be transparent about it.
Yeah, be transparent about it. That,
but you can read. You can read the history. You can see it.
Yeah, you can.
Good question.
I think
we need an AI ethicist now for this conversation.
I mean, I'm tempting to just go fully transparent, right? And just be like, hey, I'm using AI reaching out to you. Information is the same, whether it's me sending it or it's just basically AI sending it. I'm crafting all this email as a template, and we all know that.
I think the norms are going to change on this pretty fast, and it's very good to see where the trends are happening, and then you'll get ahead of the curve, basically. With that being said, the closest thing that I've been to decision making in that situation is did it for a recruitment channel where we had like thousands of applicants, and we need to be able to sort through them very quickly. And for us, we did a handover where our AI, we called it Paige. That was their name for it. And Paige does everything, but then they do an official handover once the first call occurs, and then we don't pretend it's the same person. But in that case, we did not add in it was AI generated, and actually for the most part it's just following templates for the most part. So maybe that was partially why that question didn't come up as much, but there were some parts where AI is pretty involved. So that's, I can only say that as a signal in one of our companies that we did, but ultimately you have to kind of see where the norms are going and make a decision for your company's culture.
Cool, thank you.
Depending on how much I don't know how much access you would have to previous people that you've had conversations with, but it might be something where you could actually get some customer feedback or prospect feedback on that. It's like, hey, if this conversation, I don't know, it's a little bit tricky to figure that one out, but yeah, I think a question I might ask myself in that situation is that, if the person found out later that A, would they ever find out? B, if they did, would they feel like you somehow lied to them? And if yes, then I'd be transparent. If no, then I don't think it matters. But it's just one way I would think of for personally.
Thank you.
If it's useful or not.
Thanks for the preso, Garrick. I really like the point you made about the quality of input being so important for the quality of output. And I'm actually a content writer, so I have been starting to experiment with some of these tools. And a fear I have when using these tools is, say, if I am interviewing a client and they do share something quite strategic with me, or it's a little piece of IP that it's up to me to figure out how do we communicate that externally. I guess my fear is how are the inputs used, and do we need to be concerned about our IP getting kind of consumed and maybe spat out to another user somewhere else, and how do we manage it?
So I love this question. And there's quite a there's quite a few different ways I want to tackle it, but let me make sure I'm understanding it and answering the way that you're imagining. So can you give an example of the IP that you'd be talking about in broad strokes? Like your own IP or the IP of the client being leaked out in weird ways, or can you give an example?
Yeah. So let's say if I'm interviewing a client over a Zoom call and I've got a transcription tool generating a AI generated transcript and summary from that. And I might go to that to create a piece of content myself. But my concern is maybe they've told me something, I don't know, unique about their business strategy or approach, or maybe how they've developed a product. And I'm sort of conscious of, I want to use these tools, but I want to be careful about what we speak about in front of these tools, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, Eli talked about this really well a second ago of, that the human is still accountable for the final output. And so if I were thinking about that in your position, I would be thinking about what are the notes I'm going to take to like have red flags in the final output. So let's say that a lot of the writing is automated. Like it practically just takes the transcription and spits something out. And then and there's very little customization in the input, like worst case scenario. So highest risk of it, being outputted in a sensitive way. In that case, then it's about note taking and just applying QA on the back end before it gets posted. One other thing I would say is that that your particular position as a writer is going to be one that's disrupted most heavily in the sense of, the writers that use this technology can produce 10 times more. So the question is, do we need 10 times more content? And maybe yes, because like demand sometimes adapts to supply, but things were already kind of overwhelmed. So in this case, I don't think the demand's going to increase that much. So there will be a lot of disruption to these positions. And I think that there will be people that are going to be following the Miyazaki way, like Haruhi Miyazaki with his Studio Ghibli films, where they like almost their brand is they do not use modern ways of creating animation. They're only old school. And in fact, Haruhi has said, we're really happy where the market is going because it just highlights our difference ever more so. And so I think that there will be a sub niche of people that are going to do that with zero AI, and that will be their marketing said crudely gimmick, right? That's going to be how they do it. But it's really, will the demand be that high for that? Maybe not. Studio Ghibli is just one studio. But that is something you can consider. On the flip side, though, I would probably just embrace the new technology and try and make sure my 10x output is still a higher quality than other people's, which will really boil down a lot to the prompt engineering and the level of attention I can provide.
Garrick, I had an idea or a question in this conversation, listening to the two of you, presuming I understand it well. Would it be possible in her process to come up with prompts that would help her red flag IP, like sensitive things that are unique? You think that could be possible?
And just to add to that question, my fear is not so much the IP coming out in the output of the AI. It's how is the IP consumed and used within the machine learning for other users? Like where does it? Does that get sucked into the ether, and where does it go?
Yeah. So these some tools are getting out there, especially for the developers and the coders, is allowing you to cardon that off. Is that the right word? I don't know. Is allowing you to cordon. Okay, is allowing you to block it. But that's for developers building custom applications. If you're using the ChatGPT interface, you don't have access to that. I'm sure that's in the pipeline, and it'll just cost more. You pay an extra $15 to make sure that your inputs outputs aren't fed in the main machine. With that being said, I do want to give one story to highlight this worry. I have a friend who is learning how to add AI into a particular business that does home repairs in Denmark. And as his partners in Denmark were also doing something similar, they were seeing their names start appearing much more often when it was like search top 10. So I think we are going to have a new version of SEO that is going to be not search engine optimization, but AI optimization.
Back channeling through AI.
Exactly. So, you know, this is a real worry. I would say one last thing, though, is depending on the uniqueness of the IP, it won't, like, it knows this stuff because it has a billion examples of it. And one example of one particular IP is probably a drop in the ocean, depending on its uniqueness. I think that a lot of worries here are a bit unfounded. If it's a truly unique idea, then it probably is by itself. If it's not unique, well, yeah, you'll contribute to the torrent, but the torrent's already there. And of course, then there's like prisoner's dilemma. And I think there's a lot of good conversations to be had here, but I just want to make sure we're a little bit grounded in that reality. It's still a very important question. It's very, very important, especially as we're in the early days, but realistically,
just trying to put a cap on this particular problem. Do you think that transcription software specifically, do they, like, let's say Otter, do they write into their, terms and conditions or their privacy policies? Is it easy to find out if the information itself can be digested by the AI versus just language learning? Because as far as I know, like Otter is learning how to understand language, but I don't know that they're doing anything with, I would assume and hope they're not using the content for anything at all ever.
Yeah.
It would be in their privacy policy. Yeah, I gotta open that up. I would assume so as well, Eli. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a helpful answer, Caitlin? Is that helpful enough?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, you have your hand raised as well.
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. Very helpful. Just before I ask my question, to go back to Caitlin's, one thing that I found useful, or at least useful in my head, is if the IP is actually not that complicated, I'll just change the company name. I'll change like a few words within my inputs, and then I'm not so worried that like things are leaking out because I've used like fake names. And then it's still giving me the overall output, and I can change the names back in my whatever I'm using it for later. But Garrick, one quick question is, how do you
steal that? That should be. I must steal that. That's a good answer.
How do you keep up with the trends of AI? Like everything's moving so fast, and there's so many new. I think there's like 100 new companies coming out a day. What's the best tools and ways to just keep up with the trends in the space?
So, I mean, I think this comes back down to the FOMO of like, you got to ask yourself what's motivating that, because there's these. The way that I see it is that there's a few giants in the space, and then they've introduced this new tool in the market, which is having cascade effects as smaller fish in the ocean are then like pilot fish on sharks. Like they're carving out their own niches. Half of them, 80% of them, are just going to go away in a year because the giant is then just going to eat them also. And so there is a question of if it is affecting your core loop, how you deliver value to the audience. Like, you probably need to be on the cutting edge of those things that attach to that, because your first mover advantage is going to be really powerful. But on the flip side, like, you really need to know everything. So that's a little my cop-out answer. My real answer is dedicated study time. So like I said, don't dabble, go in deep with a few tools that you think will actually go in. And then the other answer is I'm part of a few communities. There's one called Next Labs that Eli actually introduced me to, and there's a lot of other ones out there. And I just join certain communities and just see what's popping up there, and that's often enough, of a radio in my ear. So that's my cop-out and non-cop-out answers.
No, thank you very much. That's helpful.
All right, well, I guess we probably should head toward wrapping it up. Is that okay, Charlotte? Or should we?
I think Fred just
one
put his
more
hand up, so maybe just one more quick question
cool.
before we wrap up. But it has definitely sparked a lot of, I mean, I have lots of questions, but of course I will save them. Fred.
Are you muted?
Can't we get AI to do that? Just know when we're going to talk.
Yeah. Just a quickie at the end. In my experience, for myself and also indirectly, I've always noticed that the quality of the prompts you put in makes such a big difference, right? So what's your quick advice in terms of learning how to make better prompts, and also delegating that through the organization? Because otherwise you're going to get a lot of time lost on figuring out how to ask the bloody question in the first place.
I'll throw out the best open source community I found for prompt engineering. I'll put it in the chat, but it's an open, there we go, found it. It's an open source website where people are contributing to for prompt engineering. And my way of learning this stuff is I watch videos and then I apply it back and forth. But for teaching an organization, a website like the one I put in the chat could be something pretty interesting. It's being updated in real time by a community on the best practices for prompt engineering. So that's something that I've started to give out homework to my people. But to be honest, I have not myself used it, so I cannot say to its full utility yet. But it's, yeah, prompt engineering is like one of the new skills. I'm not sure if I answered your question though, but okay.
All right. Well, I'll just say from our end, thank you guys for inviting us here, and appreciate the opportunity to be of service. Garrick and I both love helping, like I said, purpose-driven startups and founders and innovators. So if you think of anything that you think we could be potentially helpful for, even if it's just a conversation, or you're not sure if we could be helpful, we particularly love, we exist. Valhalla, Garrick and I don't exist necessarily for this completely, but Valhalla, the company we created, exists to amplify the impact of purpose-driven tech companies. So if anybody out there is building a tech product and you're in let's say a transition stage from an MVP to taking, moving your capacity in-house, that's really where we help people the most. And we'd love to, what we do is help people make sure they've got the optimal team and dynamics and like a high-performing product development ecosystem going. So if you think, you're welcome also to message me on the Slack group in Climate Salad or on LinkedIn. Just reach out anytime. Love to see what we can do to help. And if it's not something we could help you with, I've probably got people I know. Also, I run a podcast called Products with Purpose. I think Charlotte put the link there earlier. If any of you feel like you'd be a good guest for it, feel free to nominate yourselves, or if you know somebody you think I should interview, and would just love feedback also on that podcast, where I interview founders of purpose-driven tech companies mostly. But also this morning, I interviewed somebody who is working, he's from Serbia, moved to San Francisco, and has come up with a way to make amazing honey with no bees. So just like really cool stuff like that. And yeah, so thank you guys for having us, and thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much. Definitely an incredibly hot topic. I'm sure there'll be lots of hit ups on LinkedIn and Slack to dive deeper into this. And I'm afraid to say I'm in that sort of, I guess I'm getting older and I'm getting fearful and, change, but I'm trying to embrace it as much as I can. So thank you for this wonderful step-by-step presentation on how to adopt that culture and, like find those champions. Don't just leave it to the IT, but it also overwhelmingly feels like everyone, roll up your sleeves and get onto those tools and learn as much as you can. Thank you so much.